Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's first in our series of 3 manufacturing webinars. My name is Alex Turner. I'm the Joint Managing Director of the Business Desk, and it's great to have so many of you online with us this morning. Our manufacturing series is called Manufacturing the Recovery, and the focus this morning is going to be on the advanced manufacturing sector. It's particularly timely today given yesterday's GDP data, which, although expected, still highlighted just what a difficult spot the economy is in. I think for those of you who saw some of Rishi Sunak's interviews yesterday, were part of his reason for the depth of the drop was because the UK economy likes to socialise more than its European neighbours. It's, I think, useful for us to put the focus on the manufacturing sector to see what shape it's in and how it can play its part in the transition to hopefully a reasonably fast improving economy. The format today is nice and straightforward. Got a great panel who I will introduce shortly. We can take audience questions throughout the session, which will run for about an hour. So if you go to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A button. So you can just press that, type in your question, and I will look to weave those in as we go through the discussion, or we'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A as well. Okay. If I could introduce our panel this morning, we've got Professor David Bailey from Birmingham Business School, John Madison from Jacobs CMSI, Jason Aldridge from Aerospace Engineering, and James Berry from our sponsors on this series of webinars, the law firm Freeths. So welcome all. If I could just ask each of you to kick off by introducing yourselves properly and just briefly saying whether you're optimistic, pessimistic about how things stand at the moment. And Jason, if I could start with you, please.
Jason Aldridge, Managing Director of Aerospace Engineering, an aerospace engineering company in Coventry. We're part of the ASG Group, headquarters in Manchester, who are Aero Services Global, cover all types of aerospace work. I'm a business owner, so I'm born optimistic, basically. So.
Great. John?
Hi, I'm John Madison, Director within Jacobs, within our technology and innovation business. So we exist really to solve problems. So we specialise in solving our customers' problems. We operate primarily in the nuclear industry, but increasingly beyond. And of course, to be able to solve the kind of problems we see in the industry generally now, there's a big emphasis on technology and innovation as part of that. In terms of optimistic or pessimistic, I think optimistic, both pre-COVID and now. For our sector, for nuclear, there's a lot going on. Reactors continue to generate power. Plant still needs to be decommissioned, and there's quite a lot of opportunity around future plant fusion, SMRs, AMRs, etc. So the future is quite bright for nuclear, I think.
Great. David?
Yep, thank you very much for having me on. I'm David Bailey, Professor of Business Economics at the University of Birmingham Business School, one of the region's great universities, and there's several of them. We've made a number of mistakes, I think, in terms of our handling of the pandemic, which means the economic hit has been greater than it could have been. We all know that and feel that. I'm optimistic in the ability of manufacturing to get through it, but the government has got to step up and do more to support it.
Okay, great. And finally, James?
Morning, everyone. My name is James Berry. I'm a partner with a national law firm called Freeths. We have offices around the country, in all of the major cities, 13 offices in total. Commercial law firm, and I specialise in commercial disputes. Great.
Thank you. Well, if I could start off, David, by just picking up on that point about the government needs to do more? I think at the moment, whether it's the government or individual companies, taking the right action now will have an impact for not just the next few months, but the next few years. So what needs to happen now, do you think?
Okay, I'll leave the other panel members to talk about what they're doing because they know about manufacturing. But from a government point of view, we've seen, really useful interventions by the Chancellor on things like the furlough scheme to try and keep capacity in place and lending support to companies. Not all of that has got through. There are particular problems for SMEs who've been unable to, particularly medium-sized companies, unable to access finance. There's going to be issues about finance and cash flow going forwards. The furlough scheme comes to an end in October, and there are real issues at that point about companies, particularly in manufacturing, laying off workers. So we're going to face a wave of redundancies later in the year, which will in turn have a knock-on impact on confidence and consumer spending. So then I think there needs to be some sort of sector-specific support for manufacturing to help it through from then on. Things like a part-time wage subsidy that they have in Germany, whereby you can keep workers on part-time, retrain them, boost productivity, better support in terms of finance, and also much more help in the way of training and retraining. Irrespective of the crisis, we're facing Industry 4.0 arriving in a big way. Jobs will be destroyed, new ones created. Companies will have to redo what they're already doing in different ways, and we need to constantly train and retrain. We're not very good at that in the UK. We need to be much better. So, there's a saying, never waste a good crisis. Let's try and use this to put in place policies to really help manufacturing, which, a really stupid point. Manufacturing is really important. It may only formally account for 10 or 12% of the regional economy, but when you add in services linked to it, it's about a third of the economy locally. And it's important for good quality jobs, research and development, exports, and it will be vital to our recovery as well. If you look at the last global financial crisis, those economies with a balance of payment surplus and a strong manufacturing base recovered more quickly.
And Jason, you're at the sharp end of having to make those decisions around, staff investment, training. Where's your mind at the moment?
Yeah, well, what David said is spot on, really. Going back to the furlough, great scheme, really helped us, gave us time, as companies, gave us time to replan. I don't think that's what the public saw, was that it did help the employees, but it helped the employers to be able to restructure their companies in a sensible manner. You weren't panicking, your people were being paid, and you could set your new levels, which is what we did. So the furlough scheme was the one good thing, in my opinion, that the government have done, really. I'm agreeing with David that it needs a lot more help. What has happened with the furlough is truthfully now we're having to start putting money in, and we're Aero Engine. So we can see that this is a long-term situation. Planes are starting to fly again, but not enough to assist that they're going to need to start making new planes, or that the amount of planes is similar, that the amount of maintenance, overhaul and other works will continue. So we've come to that reality in furlough now that we have now got to make some redundancies because we've got to run at this new level, which we can do and we're doing successfully. But truthfully, at Aerosmith, we're at probably 60 or 70% of where we were before. We'd had super growth the last 3 years, won the Queen's Award for International Trade. We doubled our turnover. So we were in a good position anyway. But this is the reality now. For the next couple of years, it's about making money at this new level and moving forward. I mean, our mindset really is that we need to use this time, one, to consolidate, and two, to improve. We've got to improve our processes. We've got to use digitalisation, and we've got to come out with it better. That's what I was saying to you, really, that I am very positive, but that's after 6 months of a really hard 4 or 5 months. It's been quite grueling. But as business owners, you naturally are positive and naturally are looking forward. So you look how you can make this right, how you can make your company profitable. And that's what we've done. But it is about now training, bringing digitalisation in and getting better moving forward. I think the pandemic, along with Brexit, hopefully will make Britain a better manufacturing base. Hopefully all the PPE will be made in the UK now. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully we'll reshore a load of our work, and we'll use it as a positive.
Great. John, you're part of a global giant, but that doesn't mean that there aren't lots of pressures in the same sort of way. So, how would Jacobs and how is your team responding to the current situation?
We've managed to adapt pretty well, really. We have elements of our business that can work from home comfortably, other elements that can't. And because part of what we do is involved in keeping the lights on effectively, keeping plants operating, we have had people on site all the way through the process. Now that's actually been okay, I think, and obviously the size and scale of us means there's relative protection. I think the challenge comes with supply chain. So obviously, we're heavily reliant on supply chain, on SMEs. We've seen pressure there, which we've tried to help where we can. Things like advance payments on some with some suppliers, but it's a worry. That next level of protection from the government isn't clear. And of course, opportunity exists around digitization, around technology and innovation, investments from the government in kind of research and development around all of that's really important. But there's a more immediate challenge, I think. And if we're not careful, if we don't address that immediate challenge, that future view of the world and the opportunity associated with that future view of the world may pass us by.
And James, you obviously get to see lots of different companies. What's your sense of the sector at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think professional services generally can be a bit of a barometer almost, aren't they, in terms of how clients are doing and what support is required. From my perspective, in disputes, then it's very busy, which isn't perhaps a good sign. And the same for the employment teams. They're very busy helping with restructuring and redundancies, which again is obviously not what any of us want to be talking about. On the positive side, actually the corporate activity hasn't dropped off as much as perhaps we'd expected. And there are signs there that there's positive steps being taken by companies to look at M&A and obviously injections of finance and capital. So I think what we're seeing generally is when insolvency hasn't gone the way that a lot of people expected. We're not seeing a run of insolvencies, whether that's because of C-bills and the government support, the furlough schemes and so on, that remains to be seen. So at the moment, actually, what we are seeing is still relatively positive.
Great. And I think part of it, I suppose the lack of insolvencies, although there have been a few in the sector, have been around manufacturers' ability to pivot. I mean, Jason, I know that your organisation pivoted at the start of lockdown to find a way to be the only people on the industrial estate still working.
Yeah, we did the ventilator challenge. We were approached by Rolls-Royce to work on the ventilators, which absolute honour. I was so pleased that they asked us to do that, and we had 4 or 5 weeks where we worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, producing these ventilator parts. And I was mentioning it's a bit of a black story, but it's true that we were actually the only company at that start of when Boris had told everyone to stay at home. We'd got a letter, well, an email 5 minutes later saying, no, you come in. So we did that, got on with the ventilator work. We were the only company left on the industrial estate until the shop fitters next door started up. We'd just won a large coffin making contract. So we were making ventilators, and next door to us, we were making 400 coffins a week. So that's really the story of our pandemic, to be honest. That sticks in my mind a little bit.
Yeah, and David, so from that broader economy point of view, people have talked about the pandemic really accelerating change that had perhaps been ticking along, like the working from home agenda. But in the manufacturing sector specifically, do you think there have been changes that will have been accelerated by the experience of the last few months?
Yes, I think that what we'll see is that the changes that are taking place anyway will be accelerated. So, the embrace of automation to take out the risk of illness, the shift online. So the embracing of Industry 4.0, I think, will be accelerated, which raises opportunities and challenges for manufacturers, and again means the government is going to have to step in to help companies take those technologies in. There's a program in the Northwest called Made Smarter. We need to have that in the West Midlands and on a big scale. So that's one factor. We're also seeing, I think, a shift in consumer taste. I think there's a recognition that poor air quality is a contributing factor here. And while car sales, have not done very well, they did okay in July, plug-ins, electric and hybrids, have done incredibly well. So we're just beginning to see the start of the electric vehicle revolution. So I think there are some big structural shifts coming in manufacturing, which will be accelerated by this. And I think helping companies seize those opportunities is going to be a big part of industrial policy, or it should be.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the ways that structural shift happens is by the big companies working with the SMEs in the region to develop a really robust supply chain. And I know John Jacobs have just opened a big research centre in Egremont. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and about how Jacobs works with the nuclear supply chain in the region?
Yeah, so where we try to position ourselves is as a system integrator. So I talked about us solving problems. We don't have all the best ideas out there and all the best technologies. In fact, smaller companies, more agile companies, more often than not do. The challenge we've got is the barrier to entry for those ideas and technologies into nuclear and into other sectors as well. So we've been in the situation for a long time in the industry where the end user wants new ideas and technology. The SME or even academia has a great idea, a great solution, but then we hit the valley of death. So the barrier to entry, the quality requirements, the safety requirements, the integration needs, the kind of background pedigree prevents a lot of those good ideas getting to market. So what we're trying to do, and the reason for the Egremont facility, which replicates some facilities we've got in Warrington as well, is to be that glue in the middle, the system integrator. We're trying to get to a win-win-win situation, really, where the end user says, we've got a problem and we think we need some technology and innovation to solve it. There's some great ideas out there in supply chain. It needs to be kind of packaged up, integrated together, proven in a representative environment, and ultimately delivered as a service to the customer. So if you can get all three of those strands in place, you've got that win-win-win. So the facility in Egremont, obviously it's close to Sellafield. That's not the only customer we have in mind for that particular facility, but it's to try and do exactly that, really. It's an integration centre and a proving ground for technology ideas, but very much with the kind of end user application in mind. We talk about government investments. We've actually been part of a competition, an Innovate UK competition, for a few years now, looking at bringing innovation into nuclear decommissioning. And that's very much a kind of problem-orientated challenge. So rather than historically, there might be an R&D competition to design and build a particular robot, this has basically looked at the problem in its entirety and said, solve the problem. You can decide how to solve the problem. There's a real encouragement to work with SMEs as part of that, and that's what we've done. So we're part of a consortium of 7 companies, a university, 5 SMEs and ourselves. bring in a variety of different types of technology and innovation into that problem and into solving that problem. And it's having facilities like the one in Egremont that allows us to bring all of that together, to pull it together, prove it works as a system, and demonstrate to the end user, to the customer, that it works. So it's a real enabler really for new ideas and innovation.
Yeah, no, it looks like a fantastic initiative. Jason, from the point of view of a business owner, how do you balance that desire to innovate and to spend both time and money on R&D with the short-term challenges of keeping your staff employed and keeping everything on track?
Yeah, we'll seem a very strange statement. We're very lucky. We're based in Coventry, which people from outside of Coventry will think that's a strange statement. Actually, it's not the prettiest city in the world, but we have got some great universities around us, Coventry and Warwick, and we got the MTC, which is very similar to the AMRC in Sheffield. So we do a lot of work with the MTC. We're doing the Drama project, which is additive manufacturing. So we're quite advanced on additive manufacturing now, doing post-processing. So specialist machinery on it, which we see as a growth area. And we link this in, it trains up our people, and they see it's good. We get our apprentices from the MTC. The best, brightest students in the area go there because they perceive it being the best place. So it's uplifted the level of youngsters coming into engineering. We get graduates from Coventry University, because we're an SME. Coventry used to be the old Polytechnic, so their students are more willing to come and join the SMEs. And every year we have interns, and we'll take on a few as graduates. Brilliantly bright young people bringing stuff through. So we get graduates in every year, we get apprentices in every year, and it really helps push the company. They come in expecting the best conditions. They come in, they've got an open view. So we bring that, luckily we've got a lot of experienced engineers as well. So you mix that with the youth and all the new technologies around us, it really does put us in a good position. And certainly being in aerospace, that's what we need. We've got to have the best processes, the most advanced equipment, and the best youngsters and engineers coming through. So hence why I am genuinely very positive. We can't help that the pandemic happened. It did happen. As David said, it hasn't been handled in the best way, but there has been some helpful bits with a furlough and all this. But it doesn't detract from the British manufacturing. I can only speak from the aerospace industry, is what I've seen. I've seen it transform in the last 10 years, certainly with the supply chain and the SMEs, and with automation, digitalization, the quality of people coming in has just been a constant improvement. And I see the pandemic and Brexit, okay, has been a bit of a blip, but it hasn't changed the progress we've made. And I think we will continue to do so.
And James, throughout these difficulties and as companies wrestle with these questions of balancing priorities and putting together an effective and robust strategy, what role do advisors play in helping them to achieve what they're looking to do?
Yeah, and there's a huge role to play, isn't there? From a legal perspective, it's where do you start really, and what you're doing. I mean, big contracts go hand in hand with risk, and lawyers are all about minimising risk. So the role there is actually looking at the contract, someone experienced, advising where the risks are, what the obligations are on the parties. I mean, from my perspective, that we see some very high value disputes arising out of what the parties thought they were agreeing to and actually what's been documented. And there's often an inequality there in the supply chain between those up the food chain and the resources they've got available and access to lawyers, and perhaps those further down where there's a sense that either they have to take it or leave it if they want the business. But in my experience, I think there's probably, I'm seeing a shift in fairness of approach and a willingness to have that discussion at the very least, and to try and ensure that you're, even if you can't contract in your own terms and conditions, make sure that that you understand what your obligations are, so that you don't fall foul of those. And the same with actually what you're delivering in terms of the specification. The paper trail is probably the last thing that a lot of businesses are thinking about, because 99% of the time things are fine, there aren't any problems, but it's the 1% where it goes wrong that becomes very expensive. From a corporate perspective, it's the support around so JVs, and again, what are the parties agreeing to, and documenting that. If there's investment going on, then again having the documentation. So it's all about really speaking to the lawyers and just sense checking, and most lawyers are quite happy to have that discussion. I think some clients and businesses think that it's immediately the clock's ticking and there's an expense there, but actually it's collaboration these days. We all want to work together. It's in our interests as professional advisors to see manufacturing doing well, and we want to support that. We don't want to see businesses going under because they didn't speak to a lawyer early on in the process. And I think IP is something that's very important, that I think in the UK we've not perhaps been as good as in the States at protecting our IP and looking at. There's a lot of research and development going on in businesses, and again, actually early on in the process, thinking, well, what are we making here that we need to protect? Whether it's to stop businesses in the Far East exploiting it, or someone else just spotting that idea and taking it to the States and having it done there. So yeah, that's a big one.
Great, and that leads nicely on to a question we've got from Neil, and which will take us, I think, to the part of the discussion where we look at that. The long-term view. But Neil asked a question for Jason. You mentioned about having the opportunity to reshore PPE and other manufacturing. But you also said hopefully. So what needs to be done to turn it from hopefully we can onshore to we can onshore?
Well, I think we're showing that we can immediately. I'm part of Make UK, so we have got regional and national meetings with companies. And the amount of UK manufacturers who swap to PPE, if we just stick on PPE, I'm buying our masks from a company, Ortins, automotive company, who switched across to making PPE. I buy my masks and all that type of stuff directly from those now. And the amount of UK companies that came forward saying, we can do this, we can do the overalls, we can do all these things. They just weren't picked up, truthfully. We're just got to be honest about this. The government didn't use them and didn't pick them up and get them to do. A lot of it has got to come from the top down. Certainly the NHS is such a huge bureaucratic beast that a lot of the big items and government-led items, they just go to China, and there's been this look, oh, we get it cheaper, buy it from them. And there is no doubting you can get it cheaper. But the reason it's a chicken and egg, going back to the automation sort of argument, if we get bigger orders in the UK, we will automate, we will become more efficient and more productive. We've just got to be given the orders. We undoubtedly are one of the most skilled manufacturing nations in the world. We can do it. We're miles behind in automation. You compare us to our European colleagues. Per engineer head, we're double or treble behind the amount of automation per engineer. Okay, so we can increase production. We've done it at Aerospace. We bought a automated arm in, and it does the work. This one arm on one machine does the work of two machines. Absolutely brilliant. And it tightens up your process because you can't tweak it, and it just carries on. It goes even quicker than we expect it. So we can bring it back, but it has got to come from the top down as well. They can't just say, oh, it's down to the supply chain, it's their fault, or British manufacturing hasn't done it. The government and companies within the country have got to give the supply chain the opportunity to do this. You've got to allow us to make the stuff. So I think, and again, you go back to Brexit and the pandemic, it is highlighted that we also need to do this as a country. Okay, we are part of Europe, we are part of the world, but physically we are an island. When you get a pandemic, you saw this situation, that it's better that we can manufacture our own things. Look at the French, look at the Germans. They're brilliant at how they manufacture it in their own country. The German model is fabulous. But we have got that skill set, and we've also now got the infrastructure with the catapult centres. They were brilliant investments by the government. So we've got the mid-ground between academia and business now. We've got the catapult centres, so they can all merge together. We've got some of the best universities in the world. That manufacturers come from all over the world to go to Coventry, to Birmingham, to Warwick, Manchester, that they come to learn here. So we know we've got the infrastructure to do it. It really is in our own hands, in my opinion, to make this happen. But you've got to get the government and civil servants to do it. You've got to get the top brass of NHS to do it. It isn't down to manufacturing. My opinion, it's down to the big players to make those proper decisions now.
Great. And David, I saw you nodding along at several points, particularly on the opportunity to onshore now, and about us being behind our European partners on automation. So, how do we accelerate some of these changes?
Yeah, okay, so we've done quite a lot of work on reshoring. We found, before the recent shocks of Brexit and COVID, about 1 in 6 manufacturers in the West Midlands were actually doing it, bringing stuff back, driven by exchange rate shifts, issues about managing long supply chains that can be disrupted, and quality. So there were sort of drivers of that anyway, but there are also barriers to pushing it forward: access to finance, having the right skills. We've got great skills, as we were hearing, but at the same time, we need to be doing much more. Even issues like the availability of land for manufacturing is an issue in constraining expansion. But we know we can do it. And Jason's absolutely right. We've got a fantastic ecosystem in the West Midlands. The high-value manufacturing catapult, the universities, which are brilliant, a fantastic professional services base, which can support manufacturing. But really, I think if we're to do what Jason was just talking about, we really need to devolve down to a regional level more of these decisions. What sort of support does manufacturing need? We used to have a regionally based manufacturing advisory service, which had a scheme like the Advanced Manufacturing Supply Chain Initiative to support reshoring. If we could do more of that locally, with more devolution, perhaps through the regional mayor and the combined authority, we would be much more agile in responding to challenges and going for the opportunities that Jason was talking about. So my plea here is, let's devolve our industrial policy down to a regional level so that we can get on with it.
Yeah, I think that the regional point's a really important one. Sharon in the comments has mentioned about Liverpool being chosen for a new MTC equivalent centre, and she'd also mentioned about Make UK in Coventry. John said about
brilliant
Warrington and Egremont, AMRC with the Northwest initiative as well. There are lots of these developments trying to make a big difference locally. Is there a danger that we end up with lots of these sort of silos and nothing that joins them together, or is it better to push on at that more local level, do you think?
Can I just very quickly, I think it's the government's job to set the big strategic priorities. So, right, this is the direction of challenge. This is the tax regime that will apply. This is the financing support you'll get. These are the capital allowances, and we're going to stick at this for the next decade. So it gives certainty to business about the direction of travel, and they don't muck about. We then devolve down to the local level, the levers, the powers, the ability to get on with it. And, we have that split. I think what the fascinating story from Jason about the ventilator challenge, I think that showed the good and bad of industrial policy. The good bit was a dialogue between government and business to overcome challenges and really go for it, collaboration. The bad bit was the government saying, here's the design, you do it. That didn't work. It was about collaboration and about actors coming together. And that's when industrial policy can work well, and it can work well, particularly at a regional level.
And John, in your position at Jacobs, looking at that kind of the onshoring point, how do you find making the case for the UK and its strengths?
Of course, we're a corporation. We exist to make money, and there's the cost challenge on everything we do. I think where we do see potential to differentiate, though, is around the future, technology and innovation. You know, thinking about some of the new sectors, hydrogen production, for example. We've got quite a big space industry, which has a huge amount of potential. I talked about SMRs, AMRs, talked about fusion. We're a world leader in fusion from Cullen already. And then you think about places like Cumbria with Sellafield, and that, you know, that site kind of working towards, it's ultimately working towards closing. So all of that is opportunity with the right kind of investment. Cumbria, for example, you know, nuclear decommissioning from Sellafield is world leading, but that's not going to be around forever. So what other world leading industries could replace it? And I know the local enterprise partnerships up in Cumbria are thinking about that already. So how to upskill that community, and maybe it's upskill to focus on hydrogen production or focus on advanced manufacturing or whatever it might be. But they're the kind of, you know, picking up on David's point really, the kind of strategic government initiatives, if you like, that need to be clear. You know, communities and kind of local communities can move in those kind of directions if they know there's a future there, and I think that needs to be made clearer. So I think once that direction of travel is clear, I think there's a lot of opportunity to upskill communities. Some communities kind of building on the back of diminishing industries, and yeah, upskill local communities. You asked the question about, you know, does there need to be some kind of overarching kind of guiding organisation or governing organisation trying to bolt a lot of these things together? I think the strategic direction is the key thing associated with that. I think what you do find is those kind of organisations and initiatives naturally join up anyway. They're trying to do similar things, and I see the silos breaking down rather than building up, and then people collaborating more and more.
Yeah. And David, I think some of that strategic direction was going to come from the industrial strategy that was then being tweaked as regional industrial strategies, and I think we got a couple of those away before chancellors changed and business ministers changed, and the government's focus shifted onto Brexit and then COVID. How important do you think the industrial strategies are to provide that, you know, local focus and direction? And are they going to come to fruition in the way that it was hoped?
Yeah, good question. Hugely important. We don't know whether they'll come to fruition. Let's remember as well as COVID, we've still got Brexit, which many people have forgotten about. You know, we cannot afford to have a messy no-deal Brexit at the end of the year with tariffs on some manufactured goods. So, you know, we've got to sort that out. I would have preferred a further extension if need be, but there's still Brexit to happen. The industrial strategy is hugely important. The government industrial strategy, I think was a good start. Greg Clark really started, I think, to try and join up technology sectors and place. It was largely the Treasury that stopped that because it was concerned about devolution of power to the region. So we never really did the place bit of it properly. So I think the lesson here is actually we need much more of a regional industrial strategy, which maybe gives more power to the combined authority to do the things that we know we are going to have to do anyway. More power and resources over skills, more power and resources to support companies with, you know, the universities and Make UK and the MTC in terms of taking on Industry 4.0 technologies, helping the supply chain reshore and reorientate to the growth sectors in the future. So the industrial strategy was a good start, but it was incomplete. There wasn't enough of a place-based dimension to it. It's interesting that since COVID hit, the West Midlands Combined Authority got together with local businesses and universities and Make UK, and they made an ask to government of support that they wanted on the things that we know we need to do. Now, they were absolutely right in identifying certain challenges and needs and the need for support from government. Well, why are we in a position as an advanced industrial country of the region having to go to the central government to ask for finance? In every other country, they would have been able to simply get on with it. We are the most centralized state in the Western world. That has to change.
Yeah, then James, I think one of the things that really helps drive change is those success stories, and in Sheffield where you are, you know, the AMRC is a fantastic example of what can happen through, you know, vision, collaboration, you know, drive and enthusiasm. Really, you know, it's a fantastic facility. How does Sheffield City region, as an example, make more of that facility? And then how do you think the UK manufacturing sector can share some of that best practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a sort of real shining light in the region of what can be achieved. I mean, in the space of 15 years, but it's been driven by the university, and Jason and David have both mentioned universities, and they're hugely important to Sheffield in particular, but I think to every city, aren't they? What it's been is a catalyst for change, but a magnet to bring in a collective mind, and you've got different types of businesses, but actually putting them in the same location and having these centres of excellence and of innovation and so on has sort of really brought about an upskilling to the economy, and that as a driver for change, not just in manufacturing, but for the city region, has been enormous. I mean, it started with, you've got Boeing and Rolls-Royce, and obviously McLaren were one of the latest ones last year to join. But around that, it's the supply chain. And one of the things that I saw perhaps 10 years ago was SMEs saying, well, what's this got to do with me? But actually the training centre that sits within the AMRC that's bringing the apprentices along, I think all SMEs now in the region would recognise the enormous benefit that they have from greater talent and access to skilled employees that have been brought through these larger organisations. So, yeah, I don't think we could, in Sheffield, underestimate at all the impact that it's had. McLaren and Boeing have been really good examples where they've really made an effort to actually source locally, and there are a number of examples within the Sheffield area of clients of mine that are now supplying into their supply chain, which is obviously fantastic. But I think there's still more to be done around that. And it was interesting, David mentioned land being an issue, and I think actually that's been one of the limiting factors now, is the price of the land. 15 years ago, it was an old regenerated mining area, and you know, paying next to nothing for space, and now it's premium. It's a premium site. There's very little left, and where does it go next? And I suppose that's why Sheffield University has looked to partner with other areas of the country to broaden that out. But yeah, I think access to land is a challenge.
I think what you see from that facility as well is the benefit of a hub. So, you know, started with the AMRC, it's been built on. Other highly skilled businesses have set up around it. UK AEA are building a facility there now as well, a fusion test facility. So there's that benefit, you know, build something very capable, very high technology, get the skill base up, and people will flock to it, and that's what we've seen in Sheffield for sure.
It's also been a real sort of window, I think, to SMEs that are kind of often with Industry 4 at the early stages, it's saying, well, again, what does this mean for me if we're a traditional sort of metal bashing type business, shall we say, and having the Factory 2050 as this real sort of window for businesses to go and look at new technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality, and how that's going to start to have an impact on how staff are trained, on how you can work remotely and integrate with suppliers and customers. I think that showcasing the technologies to businesses, just everyone comes away just saying, wow, you know, I'm really interested in this. You know, the augmented reality of being able to visualize how if you move your warehousing and your factory floor around, you can increase efficiency and flow of people and so on. So I think that's been, again, transformational in people taking away, because you can talk about Industry 4, but to a lot of people, until they see it and see what it can mean for them, that's been fantastic.
No, great. If I could just jump into one of the questions, if I could point this one in your direction, David. It's a question about circular economy and about how manufacturers can incorporate the principles of circular economy into their businesses. Yeah,
it's a really good point. So increasingly, part of Industry 4.0 is using resources more efficiently. You know, instead of, in a basic sense, starting off with a huge chunk of metal and kind of taking bits off it, you build things up. So there's a chance to re-engineer our kind of, to use the pun, our manufacturing system to be much more sustainable. And as we've heard from some of the other speakers about the future use of new fuels, and it's going to be a huge industry around batteries, which we should be backing in a really big way, investing in the region in that, and also hydrogen as well. So again, this comes back to the point we were making earlier. The government needs to be setting very clear strategic priorities about where we can go in terms of sustainability. And at a regional level, we should have the power and the resources to help companies embrace more in the way of a circular economy, whereby things get reused, recycled, we can keep resources in the local economy. This is going to be really important, for example, in the case of batteries. So the batteries that will go into many things that we use, including cars, there are ways that we can then recycle them and reuse them in the local economy. And that helps us overcome the potential over-reliance on China in particular for the batteries we're going to be using in the future. So embracing circular economy principles is going to be absolutely key, I think.
Yeah, and Joe, it's hard to think back to sort of a year ago when the big issue was Greta Thunberg and climate change, and how that was suddenly and justifiably at the top of the agenda for a while. John, in a sector like yours, and with issues like nuclear decommission, how is the thinking around sustainability shifted, and where are the opportunities in the years ahead?
Well, nuclear's always sat in a strange place, isn't it? It's a renewable energy source, but in a lot of ways it's dirty as well. We need to move to zero carbon, don't we? We all know it needs to happen, and we need to find whatever energy mix that will allow us to get there. Nuclear definitely plays a part. Improving nuclear decommissioning and the handling of the waste and the storage of the waste is an issue that needs to be resolved. But there are other energy sources out there as well. Renewables has increased vastly. We've mentioned hydrogen. We talk about batteries and cells and that kind of thing. There's a variety of different energy production methods, carbon-free, and that's what we need to be focusing on as a nation. There's a real opportunity there to put ourselves back at the front of the world in developing some of those technologies.
And Jason, as a business owner, how high up your priority list is sustainability, and has that been affected by the last 6 months?
Yeah, it's how you answer the question, isn't it? I mean, obviously, aerospace, there's a lot of new engines coming through, trying to much more sustainable engines. There's new materials to be used on the planes to make them lighter, to use less fuel. There's additive manufacturing to reduce the size of the products you're going to use. There's a huge amount of design work going forward, which obviously, as a business owner in aerospace and at the front end of development of aerospace, I'm a big fan of, because if we end up changing all the engines, brilliant. Do you know what I mean? That would be down to us to make all these new engines. But that's what we're seeing. Again, going back to the MTC, going back to the catapult sensors, the unis and all this, this is what we're good at. they've just built the new battery test centre close to us. And that has got to be the way forward, isn't it? If we can get these batteries to have huge lives in them, that's going to be the change, isn't it? That's the big change in going forward, electrification or this type of thing. There's going to be huge changes going forward, which can only be good for manufacturing. I think we have seen that that's coming. And I think we have invested in research establishments to help with that. And I think the supply chain is perhaps at times underestimated, that we too have jumped onto that. What James said was right, that it did take a while for the supply chain to get into these catapult centres. But I do think the supply chain is there now, that they're there, they're working together, both sides see. There's no good having world-class primes and big companies if you've got a second-rate supply chain. Both have got to grow at the same pace. So I see the catapult centres working hugely with us. Like I say, this drama project we're doing on additive manufacturing, it is brilliant. It's an independent project which is teaching the supply chain about additive manufacturing, how you get in, where you can assist. That's where you need the link, is between these new sustainable things, inventions coming through, the big companies doing it, but you've got to have that link to the supply chain so that we keep up with it. And that really is the art. It's a different view on sustainable, I give you that. But that's the reality of it.
Yeah. I think one of the...
Can I just jump in? Do you mind if I just want to echo that? I mean, what we've got in the West Midlands, I think, is a phoenix industry that's arisen out of the ashes of, mass automotive manufacturing. But it's companies like Aerospace, Penso, RDM, who often come up with the solutions for the bigger players. Big manufacturing shifting to an open innovation model. They have to look outside. And it's our supply chain companies that often do the innovation for these bigger players. So it's absolutely critical in the new technologies that are coming. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was just going to make the point that it's interesting how some of this seems to have a regional focus. The MERS, so Andy Street in the West Midlands is desperate to secure a major battery investment. Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester is really pushing the zero carbon economy program very hard, as are some of the others. In the comments, Sharon's mentioned about Stockport's looking to benefit from the levelling up program around developing an eco-manufacturing business park that will have that sustainability focus, which I think is a really interesting development. James, just briefly on sort of M&A and investment, there seems to have been a shift in the last 18 months, 2 years, where actually that's become one of the questions that investors are asking of businesses. What's your sustainability plan? What's your environmental impact? How are you bringing that into your business strategy? Is that something you're seeing, or is it perhaps still more talked about than done at the moment?
It's about priorities, I think, for businesses, isn't it? And the management team and what they've got in front of them. And right now, David mentioned, obviously, we've had Brexit, and that seems to have been forgotten a little bit. And now we've had the pandemic. But I think in contracting, in the supply chain, then yes, Jason, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it's in there as a sort of tick box if you're tendering for certain opportunities to be seen to have the right accreditations and what are your policies on dealing with waste and being carbon neutral and so on. So I think it is a priority, but it needs to be driven, I would say, more forcefully by the government to move it up the agenda, because I think it needs to be a higher priority than perhaps it is. So no, I wouldn't say I'm seeing it as I think everyone's aware, but it's the cost that goes with it. And until there's the incentives there to actually be able to invest and replace perhaps inefficient machinery, or to invest in the steps that are necessary to become carbon neutral, then it's not going to happen quickly enough.
That's interesting to hear. Probably got time just for one more question, if I could point it to each of you. Starting with you, Jason, what are you most excited about for the next sort of five years or so for either your business or the sector?
I think it's automation. It is the big thing that when we bought in our first cobot, absolutely amazed. Do you know what I mean? That the difference it made and the productivity increase, that it didn't lose jobs, it created more. Do you know what I mean? We got more productive, allowed us to win more work. And then what it does is pick up and put in. Do you know what I mean? It's hardly taking the most high level job, is it? But therefore, your engineers have to get it right, your process has to be right. But the difference in our pricing and what we can offer by bringing automation and digitalisation in, I think could give us that leap that British manufacturing, certainly the supply chain needs. And I can just see it absolutely transforming us.
Great. John?
Yeah, I think kind of a lot of what I've said already. Really, I think we're brilliant innovators in this country, brilliant innovators, and there is lots of opportunity to be at the head of innovation as the world is changing, and it's changing by necessity. So all of the new industries we've kind of touched on already, we in the UK have an opportunity to lead. And to do that, we need to embrace innovation, automation, digitization, all of those good things. But that opportunity is real now over the next 10, 20 years, and that's exciting.
Great. David, what about you?
Yeah, I'd echo. I think that they've summed it up brilliantly. We're entering the fourth industrial revolution. Industry 4.0 will transform our whole economy, actually, in terms of automation, use of sensors, drones, artificial intelligence, and much more. That opens up potentially big challenges, but also whole new opportunities. Completely new markets will be created. So a lot of jobs will be destroyed and new ones created. We've got to train and retrain our workers throughout their lives. Now, how existing sectors and these new technologies are combined will vary from place to place. So we've got to have more power regionally to really grasp that opportunity that we face in the future.
Great. And the last word to you, James.
I agree with everything that David, John and Jason have just said. I think it's almost exciting, the opportunity that there now is in many respects. I think reshoring is something that, I talk to clients over the years, and perhaps they've seen work and business lost to the Far East. Is now, I think there's a real sense that actually we can compete, we should be looking to compete, and by really embracing Industry 4, that we can continue to be world class and to grow our market share worldwide.
Yeah, and I think as we've covered in the last hour, there is a lot to be optimistic and positive about, and a lot to build on. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for, but I'd like to thank our panel, who I think have been fantastic this morning. I've really enjoyed the contributions and the discussion we've been able to have. So thank you, James, Jason, John and David for joining us this morning. And thank you to you for listening at home or in your office or wherever you're working from this morning. As I mentioned at the top, this is the first of a series of 3. So the second webinar in the Manufacturing and Recovery series is focused on the food and drink sector, which is on September the 8th. And then the third one will be on supply chain and resilience, and we'll get more into the detail around Brexit, onshoring, just-in-time manufacturing, some of those issues. So I'll drop you an email in the next day or so, just with those dates, and it'd be great if some of you are able to join us at the future webinars as well. If I could also just say thanks to Freeths for their support in this programme of webinars. Much appreciated as always, James and the team. But hope you all have a good day. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.